Penguin Random House Audio presents Manon Lescaut by Francois Prevost, read by Walter Covell.
Note by the author. Although I might have included in my memoirs the adventures of the Chevalier de Grieux, it seemed to me that there being no direct connection between them, the reader would find greater satisfaction in seeing them separately. A story of such a length would have too long interrupted the thread of my own narrative. Far as I am from assuming the character of an exact writer, I am not ignorant of the axiom that a narrative should be free from all that may render it heavy and irksome. As Horace says, ut iam nunc dicat, iam nunc debentia dici, pleraque differat, et praesens in tempus omitat. But there is no necessity to go to so grave an authority to prove such a simple truth, for good sense is the mainspring of this rule. If the public have found something interesting and agreeable in the history of my life, I venture to promise that they will be not less satisfied with this addition to it. Readers will see in the conduct of Monsieur de Grieux a terrible example of the strength of the passions. I have depicted a blind young man who refuses to be happy, who precipitates himself voluntarily into dire misfortune, who, with all his meritorious qualities, chooses an obscure and vagabond existence to all the advantages which fortune and nature can give, who sees evils without wishing to avoid them, who suffers for them, but also is overwhelmed by them without taking advantage of the remedies which are continually offered to him, who could at any moment put an end to his troubles. In fine, a contradictory character, a mixture of virtue and vice, a continual contrast of good sentiments with evil actions. Such is the groundwork of my picture. People possessed of good sense will not regard a work of this kind as useless. Beyond the pleasure of an agreeable book, the reader will find few incidents which will not serve to instruct him, and in my opinion it is to render the public a service, to amuse and instruct them at the same time. One cannot reflect upon the precepts of morality without being astonished by seeing them at once so highly estimated and neglected, and one inquires the reason of this capriciousness of the human mind, which enjoys the good and noble ideas from which, in its practice, it is so far removed. If people of a certain order of mind and breeding wish to find out the most common subjects of their conversation, or even of their solitary reveries, it will be easy to remark that they turn almost always upon some moral considerations. The most pleasant minutes of their lives are those which are passed either alone or with a friend, in considering with open hearts the charms of virtue, the sweetness of friendship, the means to arrive at happiness, the weaknesses of our nature which keep us at a distance from it, and the remedies which will prevent their growth. Horace and Boileau notice this interchange of thought as one of the most beautiful traits of which they compose the image of a happy life. How then does it happen that one falls so easily from one's high aspirations, and that we find ourselves so quickly on the common level of humanity? I am mistaken if the reason which I shall adduce does not explain this contradiction of our ideas by our practice. It is this. Precepts of morality being only vague and general principles, it is very difficult to make particular application of them to the details of manners and actions. Let us take an example. The well-born friends feel that gentleness and human conduct are estimable virtues, and they are led to practice them. But at the moment when about to exercise them, they remain suspended. Is it really the fitting occasion? Are they quite certain how far they ought to go? Are they not mistaken in the object of their philanthropy? 100 difficulties arise. They fear to be duped when wishing to be charitable and liberal, to seem only weak when wishing to be tender-hearted and sympathetic. In a word, of exceeding or not fulfilling the duties which are wrapped up too obscurely in the general notions of charity and kindness. In this uncertainty, it is only experience or example which can reasonably determine the bent of the heart. Now, experience is not in every one's power to give. It depends upon the circumstances in which an individual is placed. We must then fall back upon example to regulate our acts in the exercise of virtue. It is precisely to this class of readers that works of the kind we now present are most useful, such at least as are written by persons of honor and good sense. Each fact which one recalls is a ray of light, instruction which supplies the deficiency in experience. Each adventure is a model on which a person can form himself. It only wants to be adapted to the circumstances in which one may be placed. The whole work is a moral treatise reduced agreeably to practice. A severe reader will perhaps be offended to perceive that I have taken up the pen again, at my age, to write the adventures of fortune and of love. But if the reflections I have uttered be sound, they will justify me. If false, my error will be my excuse. Chapter 1. Why did he love her? Curious fool, be still. Is human love the fruit of human will? Byron. Just about 6 months before my departure for Spain, I first met the Chevalier de Grieux. Though I rarely quitted my retreat, still the interest I felt in my child's welfare induced me occasionally to undertake short journeys, which, however, I took good care to abridge as much as possible. I was one day returning from Rouen, where I had been, at her request, to attend a cause then pending before the Parliament of Normandy, respecting an inheritance to which I had claims derived from my maternal grandfather. Having taken the road to Évreux, where I slept the first night, I, on the following day, about dinner-time, reached Passy, a distance of 5 or 6 leagues. I was amazed on entering this quiet town to see all the inhabitants in commotion. They were pouring from their houses in crowds towards the gate of a small inn, immediately before which 2 covered vans were drawn up. Their horses, still in harness and reeking from fatigue and heat, showed that the cortege had only just arrived. I stopped for a moment to learn the cause of the tumult, but could gain little information from the curious mob as they rushed by, heedless of my inquiries, and hastening impatiently towards the inn in the utmost confusion. At length an archer of the civic guard, wearing his bandolier and carrying a carbine on his shoulder, appeared at the gate. So, beckoning him towards me, I begged to know the cause of the uproar. "Nothing, sir," said he, "but a dozen of the frail sisterhood that I and my comrades are conducting to Havre de Grace, whence we are to ship them for America. There are 1 or 2 of them pretty enough, and it is that, apparently, which attracts the curiosity of these good people." I should have passed on, satisfied with this explanation, if my attention had not been arrested by the cries of an old woman, who was coming out of the inn with her hands clasped, and exclaiming, "A downright barbarity! A scene to excite horror and compassion!" "What may this mean?" I inquired. "Oh, sir, go into the house yourself," said the woman, "and see if it is not a sight to rend your heart." Curiosity made me dismount, and leaving my horse to the care of the ostler, I made my way with some difficulty through the crowd, and did indeed behold a scene sufficiently touching. Among the 12 girls, who were chained together by the waist in 2 rows, there was one whose whole air and figure seemed so ill-suited to her present condition that under other circumstances I should not have hesitated to pronounce her a person of high birth. Her excessive grief, and even the wretchedness of her attire, detracted so little from her surpassing beauty, that at first sight of her I was inspired with a mingled feeling of respect and pity. She tried, as well as the chain would permit her, to turn herself away and hide her face from the rude gaze of the spectators. There was something so unaffected in the effort she made to escape observation, that it could have but sprung from natural and innate modesty alone. As the 6 men who escorted the unhappy train were together in the room, I took the chief one side and asked for information respecting this beautiful girl. All that he could supply was of the most vague kind. "We brought her," he said, "from the hospital by order of the Lieutenant General of Police. There is no reason to suppose that she was shut up there for good conduct. I have questioned her often upon the road, but she persists in refusing even to answer me. Yet, although I receive no orders to make any distinction between her and the others, I cannot help treating her differently, for she seems to me somewhat superior to her companions. Yonder is a young man," continued the archer, "who can tell you better than I can the cause of her misfortunes. He has followed her from Paris, and has scarcely dried his tears for a single moment. He must be either her brother or her lover." I turned towards the corner of the room where this young man was seated. He seemed buried in a profound reverie. Never did I behold a more affecting picture of grief. He was plainly dressed, but one may discover at the first glance a man of birth and education. As I approached him, he rose, and there was so refined and noble an expression in his eyes, in his whole countenance,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?